Ladies and gentlemen, it's 2 o'clock Finnish time and we are ready to start. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I'm happy to welcome you to our webinar, Integration in Minority Languages, Benefits and Challenges. I am Kristina Gestrin, the Secretary General of the Swedish Assembly of Finland, or Folktinget, as we say in Swedish. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome both our distinguished speakers and all of you participants who are joining us on this webinar today. My role is to guide us through the webinar, the program, and keep an eye on the time. We will round off the discussion at about 15:30 Finnish time. So I ask all of our speakers to keep to the given time for the presentations. So let's begin with today's program. And as we are quite a few, we will have the microphones on mute, and please also the cameras closed, except of course for the speakers when you speak, but it's possible for you to comment on the chat. So let me first of all introduce you to Sandra Bariqvist and Agustina Villaret-Gonzalez for welcoming remarks. Sandra Bariqvist is a member of the Finnish Parliament and the chairperson of Folktinget. Please, Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and greetings from the archipelago between Turku and Åland Islands. I'm sitting here on one of those islands. But dear all, I'm so delighted to welcome you all to this webinar about integration and minority languages and what the benefits and challenges are in doing so. And I must say how happy I am that this webinar has gained so much interest. As the chair of the Swedish Assembly of Finland, or Folktinget, as we call it in Swedish, I can say with great pride that integration and language is an issue we worked systematically with for quite a long time. Our aim is to promote and clarify the Swedish integration path in Finland. We want to be part in creating sustainable structures for integration and inclusion in Swedish in Finland. And it goes without saying that we do this in collaboration with several other organizations, with municipalities and other authorities. I naturally also strongly believe that migrants need to be heard systematically when it comes to designing integration services, and people's individual wishes and choices should be supported by correct information. Besides lobbying work and awareness raising work, which are of course also crucial, Folktinget annually arrange a large conference on integration in Swedish with high-level speakers and creative workshops. These conferences attract a large number of people from all over Finland, working with integration on different levels. The participant scales from NGO representatives and activists to authorities and politicians. At Folktinget, we are seeking new best practices. We believe in sharing experiences, both good and bad, and we think that discussion and inclusion is key to progress. And that is the reason we want to arrange today's webinar, to hear examples and learn from other countries and regions. How are you handling a situation where an immigrant is to be integrated in a bilingual society? What politics are there when it comes to integration in the lesser used language? And what tools do you use to allow the individual to have a successful integration? Finland was long a country of emigration, with 1 million Finns moving abroad in the 20th century. However, its population has always represented many cultures and languages, not least due to the country's geographical location between East and West. International immigration for humanitarian reasons began in the 1970s with refugees from Chile and Vietnam. With the arrival of larger numbers of refugees in the 1990s, integration policies began to take shape, particularly in the Helsinki region. Compared to its Nordic neighbors, the number of foreign-born inhabitants in Finland remains low, about 7%. In Sweden, almost 20% of the population was born abroad, while the figure in Norway is approximately 14% and in Denmark 13%. The goal of Nordic integration programs is for participants to learn the national language and enter the labor market or engage in further studies as quickly as possible. The services are based on individual plans and are free of charge for the participants. Sweden is often perceived as an earlier language to learn compared to Finnish. As an Indo-European language, Swedish is closer to English and German, making it easier to learn for those who already speak an Indo-European language. However, when choosing a language, the area in which the immigrant wants to live should be taken into consideration. There are 33 bilingual municipalities in Finland, the majority of which are located in Ostrobothnia and southern Finland. Although Swedish is used more visibly in Ostrobothnia, the number of native speakers of Swedish is highest in Helsinki. The Swedish language can be used in bilingual municipalities with central and local government authorities. In municipalities where Swedish is spoken more widely than Finnish, residents may get by using only Swedish. However, fully Swedish-speaking jobs are rare in the regions of Uusimaa and southwest Finland. Therefore, it's often also important to learn Finnish, as it is the predominant language of the labor market in Finland. Integration training provided in Swedish sometimes also includes Finnish language studies. I want to conclude by saying how much I look forward hearing your thoughts and experiences with integration in a lesser used language, and also express my gratitude to all our excellent speakers here today for taking the time to share your knowledge. Once again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra Bariqvist. And now it's a pleasure for me to give the floor to Agustina Villaret Gonzalez. She's the chair of the Network to Promote Linguistic Diversity and the Regional Secretary of University Research and Language Policy of the Government of the Balearic Islands. She's working as high school teacher of history in Catalan. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Estrin. Dear Ms. Bariqvist and member of the Swedish Assembly of Finland, and dear Ms. Gestrin, Secretary General of Folktinget, dear friends, I want to first thank our friends from Folktinget, both for inviting me to address these welcoming words and for organizing this webinar at such an opportune and difficult time. When I heard that Folktinget was working on a webinar on integration and minority languages, I was more than happy for two reasons. Firstly, because I do believe that challenges that immigration poses to societies in general and to bilingual or multilingual communities in particular, in terms of reception and social and linguistic integration, demands a thorough and serene reflection. And secondly, because I feel especially concerned about this topic since I come from an hospitable country, Balearic Island, that has doubled its population in the past 40 years, which has required a remarkable effort. I was saying before that the large number of migrants reaching Europe poses great challenges. On the one hand, it may imply a risk for the minority languages, and on the other hand, it may also lead to a fragmentation of the society. Europe has great linguistic and cultural diversity. There are over 80 autochthonous languages inside the European Union's borders. Many of them are minority languages and lack any official status. It is evident that if a large number of migrants arrive in a territory where two languages coexist and where one is the dominant socially, this can pose a risk for the minority language. The newcomer may opt for the dominant language as a means of social integration, leaving the minority one on one side. That situation can exacerbate the minority situation of the language even further. The diversity of languages spoken by migrants, which is one aspect of the rich multilingual and multicultural nature of contemporary European societies, also presents a challenge to education system in relation to teaching the official language and maintaining their mother tongues too. Failure to properly manage migration flows and their impact on minority languages could result in minority languages suffering a clear and negative impact. How shall we tackle then the challenges that multilingualism entails for lesser used languages? Both the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, Article 14, and the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages, Article 7, provide some elements of great interest. I will suggest starting by recognizing the linguistic diversity, the very core of the potential to act as a citizen informed by communicative resources. Citizens need to be equipped with such resources to be able to act in autonomous and enlightened ways, to participate in collective deliberation, and to influence decision-making locally, nationally, and transnationally. Multilingual society must be sensitive to this embeddedness and recognize the important language has for the constitution of the personal and social identities for their inhabitants. Recognition must not be taken as a means for segregating different groups according to their cultural attributes. Recognition aims at working out an approach for dealing with the challenges of diversity that is primarily inspired by the democratic motives. The openness of institutions for the articulation of different identities is meant, in the end, to be conducive to the creation of a shared civic space with both respects and transcends diversity. Because recognizing different cultural and linguistic identity is not just a legitimate end in itself, but a decisive step for creating reciprocal attachments among those supposed to participate in the making of a vibrant public culture. A culture that will imply some common standards, including linguistic standards. However, it has to be emphasized that such standards must be developed without replicating the homogenizing logic that characterized the model of the European nation state. I should not like to finish my intervention without thanking once again to Folktinget for such a great initiative. I wish you very success in this webinar. Moltes gràcies. Thank you. Taxa Mike and Kiitos Palion.
Thank you very much for your kind words and your opening remarks. So now it's time to move on and invite our speakers and experts to give their view and share their examples of integration in lesser used languages in many different countries in Europe and also in Canada. First of all, I want to welcome Dr. Vicent Climent Ferrando, who will speak about the case Catalonia. Dr. Climent is research coordinator of the UNESCO Chair on Language Policies for Multilingualism at Universitat Pompeu Fabra Barcelona. He has served as an external policy expert for the European Commission's Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. He has also been involved in a number of European projects which analyzes mobility and inclusion of migrants in today's Europe. The floor is yours, Dr. Vicent Climent Ferrando.
Many thanks, Ms. Gestrin. Many thanks to everybody, and thanks to the organizers of Folktinget for giving me this opportunity to present my research here. As the introducer spoke, I will talk about the integration in minority languages, and more specifically the Catalan case. I only have 15 minutes, so I will go as fast as I can. My presentation has two main goals. One is a general goal to reflect what type of language policies are needed in officially bilingual territories where there is a minority and majority language in a migration scenario. And then I will talk about the Catalan case. That will be my specific goal. The presentation is divided in 5 parts. The first will provide a general overview of the language policies for integration of migrants. The second will go straight into the Catalan case. The third, I will talk, maybe I will skip it because I think I'll run out of time, of the Catalan legal framework and the contested battle between Spain and Catalonia on that front. Section 4 will introduce the data that I've gathered in my research. And section 5 will talk about the concluding remarks and also some lessons to be shared in a wider European context, such as this one. Go straight to the part 1 to section 1. Language, as you all know, is an important part of integration. An increasing number of member states of the European states have adopted language requirements, language exams, language courses, or language tests for residence permits or nationality. These language exams in the vast majority of states are obligatory or compulsory. So this is an increasing trend in all European states. As some scholars have pointed out, the concept of language competence for belonging to the host society has become part of the new citizenship laws and is advocated not only by far-right populist parties, but also by mainstream politicians. So these politics of language would not be so much for language integration, but for language control, meaning that you have to learn the host society language, and if you do not, you're expelled from the country. We have then a conceptual problem. The debates on language for immigrant integration have often been taking place at a state level. That shouldn't be something to be of a surprise because immigration policies are commonly defined by the state and not by lower or sub levels of society. Little attention has been paid at sub-state level, and many European regions, such as the Basque Country, Galicia, Wales, Swedish-speaking territories in Finland, the Balearic Islands, Corsica, Valencia, and also Catalonia, have a language other than the state language or the majority language. It is very important then to discuss the regional language and immigrant integration policies. Why? Because as the president of the NPLD just said, immigrants tend to adopt the majority language for social mobility, and the consequences are reducing the sub-state population speaking the minority language. For me, something very important to be highlighted here is that any immigrant integration policy should be part of the language policy of a society. So the main goal of many regions is to shape policies also on immigrant integration. I will now talk about the Catalan case. I will highlight two legal measures, the 2010 and 2014 law, which set compulsory Catalan language courses for any immigrant to prove that they have been integrated, right? My question here to ponder on or to think about, are these compulsory language requirements for Catalan effective? Migrants, okay, they are more exposed to Catalan thanks to those measures, but my question here is, are they more willing to learn and use Catalan thanks to these measures or not? In other words, what are the real effects of these language measures? I will now turn to the second part, which is the demographic data. As you can see here on the screen, around 17% of the population today in Catalonia is foreigner, and 21 if we count those who are born in a foreign country, but maybe they have some Spanish nationality. So Catalonia, as you can see in the graph, grows thanks to immigration, not the local population, but immigration. I will go very fast on these graphs. The main nationalities are Morocco, about 250,000 people living in Catalonia, Romania, Italy, China, Pakistan, Colombia, Honduras, etc. Which are the languages spoken now other than Catalan and Spanish in Catalonia? You can see that almost 800,000 people in Catalonia, around 11–12% of the population, speak a language other than Catalan and Spanish. As you can see here, mainly Arabic, but also Romanian, Tamazight, Galician, Russian, Italian, Chinese, German, English, Aranese, etc. What about Catalan? Where is it spoken? Here you have the graph. This is the map of Catalonia. As you can see here, the 27.5%, those with a light blue or whitish light blue, is where Barcelona is located, and that's where Catalan is less spoken and less spoken on a daily basis. It's 27.5%. Those in the outskirts, if you want, of that region, are the places or the regions, the rural areas where Catalan is more spoken. So these are the figures of Catalan used as an everyday or habitual language. What about Catalan and Spanish among the foreign population? Here, the orange part of the graph is Spanish. So you can see that 99, 98, 95, 92% of the population are able to understand, speak, read, or write Spanish. On the other hand, if you can see the blue area, it's 80% of the population can understand Catalan, 51% is able to speak it, 64% is able to read it, and only 37% of the population are able to write in Catalan, of the foreign population I'm talking about. I think I'll skip this part because I'd like to concentrate more on the data, and we'll go straight to the legal framework in Catalonia. I had the legal framework in Spain, but I will concentrate on Catalonia. Catalonia has tried to shape its policies on immigrant integration and include language in these integration measures. As I said before, two laws or two acts, the 2010 Catalan law and the 2014 decree, which requires by law a 90-hour course, which is mandatory for immigrants to have residence permits. There is no exam, there's only attendance of these courses. The law always also says that it's not only about language, but also a more broader societal knowledge of the legal framework, of mores, etc. So these are all the elements that are required for immigrants to have the certificate, the first certificate to prove and to obtain residence permits in Catalonia. Where can immigrants attend or learn the Catalan? And there are 140 locations throughout Catalonia through a public body called Consorci per la Normalització Lingüística, which is a body aimed at providing Catalan courses for them to attend and have this certificate. Okay, now let's go into the facts and figures. In the latest year, we have this, take a look at the yellow part, the initial and basic courses, which are the courses that immigrants are required to take if they want to apply for residence permits. My question here, when I saw these figures, was, why are there so many people registered at the beginner's initial course, which is the yellow part of the graph, and why do figures drop exponentially after that? So the elementary, intermediate, and the more advanced courses. So why is this? The same figures in another put in another way. More and more people are taking the initial and basic, and less people are taking the elementary, intermediate, and more elaborate courses. These are the same figures, but in percentages. I will move on. I realized that there was a need to do research to understand the real effects of the legal requirements. Are these legal Catalan requirements an effective way to learn and to become part of the Catalan society? So far, I've shown quantitative data, but what about the qualitative data? What about why not asking immigrants why they take these language courses and they stop taking them after the basic courses, which is that they are required to have this permit granted. I gathered a sample of 23 students of those courses and also 4 teachers. The sample was intended to be wider, but due to the pandemic situation, the results must be taken as preliminary. And these are the main results that I gathered on the reasons for dropping language courses after the mandatory or the elementary courses. The first is that they all, or practically all, said that their main interest was for legal reasons. They needed a certificate, so that's why they were attending the beginners language courses. Also, they claimed that the schedule was not compatible to move on to do other courses. The third element that was important was that the basic compulsory courses are free, but not the rest. So that's why they didn't take any other course. And also something that was very striking, and which is something that we should take into account, is that they claim that Catalan is not needed in daily life for them. Work, friends, and family. So there was also a lack of motivation on Catalan. As you could see before on the map, here, Catalan is not spoken on a daily basis everywhere in Catalonia. So you can see that where more people are concentrated, which is Barcelona and the metropolitan area in Barcelona, is precisely where Catalan is less present, only 27% and 38%. So that explains why they claimed that Catalan is not perceived as a language that's needed in daily life. I've put also here some teachers' voices, which I will summarize very fast. They all claimed that it's not enough. 90-hour requirement is not enough. They all go for the certificate, but they all claim that they do not have a context where they can hear and speak and practice Catalan outside this mandatory academic context. So the situation in Catalonia is far from being normalized, they say. Another teacher also said that 90 hours is not enough. In other European states, these requirements are between 400 and 700 hours. And also another element that is that they do not need to take any exam. They just need to attend, to assist, and to be present at the course. So nothing else. So you're there, you don't have to take any exam. So you have 90 hours, and then you have the exam. Another preliminary result, I'm finishing already a couple of minutes, is another research in the same direction, and the conclusions are a bit the same. The beginners, many people take language test only for the certificate, nothing else. Just as a concluding remark, I have more questions than answers. My question here, that in a bilingual situation, such as in a majority situation, Are compulsory language requirements effective in a minoritized language context? The data indicate that it's not as straightforward as one might think. It's not a guarantee. Compulsory language courses are not guarantee of linguistic integration of migrants, because the results show that participation is primarily taking place in Spanish. In order for a language to be used, there has to be a need. Remember the map that I showed you before. The need in Catalan is very, very low compared to those figures. And just take into account that the majority of the population is located in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, which happens to be the area where less Catalan is spoken. And just to finalize recommendation, Catalan, and not only Catalan, but any minority language needs to be linked to progress. I needed to get a job, to a better job. I needed to make new friends. I needed to join the local chess club, for example. And in some, I need it because I want to be part of the new society. So if we switch into the majority language, in our case, to Spanish, these ideas are not perceived. In some language policy in a minoritized context is also the politics of empathy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your most interesting presentation. And now we will move on to the case Wales and our next speaker, namely Senior Lecturer Gwenna Hyam, who is a Senior Lecturer at the Department of Welsh, Swansea University in Wales. Her research is in the field of international migration and the Welsh language, with a focus on issues related to integration, belonging, and multicultural citizenship. Of special interest for us in Finland is that she will also carry out research on migrant integration through the Swedish language in Finland, and in turn compare this to the Welsh case. The floor is yours.
Diolch, Tag Kitos, thank you very much for the invitation. It really is a privilege to be with you here. So I'll just take my glasses off. So I'm very impressed by the previous presentation, and I hope I can also offer some insight from my own more research, socio-linguistic perspective. So I hope to give you an overview of, very briefly, the Welsh language situation, migration in Wales, and then particularly looking at research which has been focused on developing a provision of Welsh for international migrants, and also looking more at qualitative data on migrants' perceptions and reactions to these classes. So for those who don't know, Wales, like Catalonia, is a sub-state, and we are recognised as a devolved government where we have official bilingualism. And according to the latest census data, which was, well, 10 years ago now, so 19% of the population speak Welsh, which has declined slightly from the previous census data. So even though Welsh has been celebrated for its efforts to revitalise, there is obviously continued concern. As you can see from the map, like Catalonia, there's quite a disparity between those who speak Welsh. Mainly the red areas are the rural Welsh-speaking areas, and the greeny colours and lighter colours are obviously where the language is less spoken, and the more populated areas. And those, of course, are where migrants are mostly, international migrants are mostly residing. Nevertheless, what is interesting in Wales, of course, is when we talk about migration, we are talking about internal as well as external migration. So there are many, in fact, over a third of Wales's population is born outside of Wales, but many of those, of course, are migrants from England, Scotland, settling in Wales. So there are two factors at play in Wales. And in terms of the Welsh language, it's in a very precarious position, although the Welsh government, as you can see here, is aiming to reach 1 million Welsh speakers by 2015. So just a few brief facts then on migration. In terms of international migration, the latest data, which is also outdated, is around 6.4% of the population are from outside the UK. This is very much likely to increase with the next census data. It is important to say that international migration is on the increase, and the future of Wales's population does depend on migration. Its effect on the Welsh language, well, it has been considered one of the biggest factors contributing to the decline. That includes, of course, internal and external migration. I mean, what is increasingly interesting and obvious in Wales and in the UK are different ideologies at play. While, of course, we're aware since Brexit, there is very much a hostility towards others, especially international migrants, and there is a particular policy to deter migrants from settling in the UK. That's called the hostile environment policy. Obviously, on the other side in Wales, possibly in reaction to this, with a different government, there is a desire to portray Wales as a very welcoming nature. And there is a Welsh government strategy called Nation of Sanctuary in order to improve the conditions and lives of migrants in Wales. However, Wales does not have any voice on who comes to Wales in terms of refugees and asylum seekers, but they do have certain powers, for example, over education, Welsh language, of course, and also the area of social cohesion. So trying to make people's lives easier, better in any way that's possible. So just to move on then, more to my area of research, which looks at adult language provision in Wales. And what we have is two main institutions, one which provides English language and the other which provides Welsh language. And they are very much, have been separate entities. So the English, which is called ESOL, English for speakers of other languages, really is based in the UK ideology of English, one language, one nation. You must learn English in order to progress, etc. Even though it is in the power of the Welsh government, it generally has that main purpose and ideology. And even though there is research on promoting multilingualism of ESOL students, English is the dominant language provided. Welsh provision, on the other hand, is quite different. It is aimed at, well, UK citizens mainly, those in Wales who don't speak Welsh, and of course anybody else as well, but it is really aimed at a middle class audience. The difference between them, one of them key difference is in ESOL, on the whole, is free of charge, and you do have to pay for Welsh language provision. So they do target different groups, different audiences, and not really had much to do with each other until recently, until I started my research. Before I move on to talk about my research, I just wanted to bring your attention to a European project that I was part of, looking at the benefits of bilingual education for international migrants, especially those who want to have jobs in healthcare particularly. And Finland, as you can see, was also a part of the project. So if this is of interest, please look at the website, and there are many recommendations here. I just wanted to highlight one particular one because I know in the summary of this event, the question was which language is useful for migrants to learn, and certainly from our research, the idea is that actually it's not a case about which language. It's about the opportunity to have both the dominant and minority language and education in these both languages to be available to all migrants. However, my own research, which interviewed many language teachers, including the English and the Welsh teachers, also government policymakers in Wales, as well as migrants, this monolingual ideology was very much present, and you can see from the extracts that I have here. So these are from the English teachers, and they do reflect, to be honest, general attitudes of the government officers in Wales I interviewed, that basically you do need to choose between one and the other. And obviously English is the dominant language. It's considered the language of progress, the language of cohesion, and some comments on Welsh not being useful. And yeah, obviously English is the obvious one. Sorry about that. This was also reflected in a Welsh government policy. So its first ESOL policy in 2014, where they described ESOL in Wales as an additional challenge. Why? Because there are two languages, and Welsh bilingual signs, for example, can be, well, difficult to understand because English is already different to them. So this is kind of the context that I've been working in, and I was interested to think about this and wonder, well, what do migrants think themselves? I mean, these are, to what extent is this based on any background research? This is a general ideology, attitude that is employed and used by people. So I was very pleased to be the first person to establish Welsh classes for migrants as part of my research. And I tried to do it in a very flexible, adaptable approach. I did actually go to Quebec and look at what was done there, the francisation classes there. So partly it was inspired by what was happening in Quebec. But I soon realized that teaching Welsh to international migrants was very different to the idea of teaching English. And one of the things I found was by introducing Welsh, which is a non-dominant language, opened a platform to talk about a variety of subjects and areas which maybe wouldn't have been so possible with English. And there is research that has been taking place on the fact that taking a non-dominant language can enable migrants to be more free to talk about areas, talk about their own personal difficulties, struggles, of course, their own multilingual backgrounds, but even partly their own personal experiences of trauma. And this is what I found, in fact, that it really opened a door to lots of different pathways, and it really became much more than simply teaching a language. It was really taking the whole person. And of course, my role was more of a mediator. Yeah, the other thing that was interesting is that while ESOL English was tied very much to what they had to do for citizenship or for exam requirements, there was some sort of release and a bit more freedom with Welsh. And I did observe that empowered many of the students to have a voice and also feeling of empowerment to be able to contribute to Welsh language revitalisation efforts. Many, of course, such as Kurdish people, who could very much relate to the situation in Wales. Right. Sorry, just, yeah. The other interesting thing very quickly is that while working with the English provision, an extra, well, bonus as far as I'm concerned, was that I was able to challenge some of these monolingual ideologies amongst the teachers. And through taking part in these classes, some of the teachers' attitudes actually changed and realised, you know, that it is possible to learn more than one language. You don't have to fit into set boxes, etc. And I think working together, as far as I'm concerned, in the Welsh case, has a lot of positive benefits. As a result of my research, and some years have gone by, so the Welsh provision for adults has now developed a particular course targeting international migrants. It is free of charge, I believe, mainly for refugees and asylum seekers. It's only been established since 2019, so we're very different to the situation in Catalonia. However, there are groups all over Wales now of migrants who have been learning through this course. in both the cities in the south, as well as more rural Welsh-speaking areas. And also they have been reaching out to the English provision and training English teachers to use this course. So it's really been based in more of a community-led approach rather than from the government. And also, as you can see, maybe from the different languages there, the idea of multilingualism has been ingrained as an important part of the course. So my time is going, so I thought I might just turn quickly to some reflections of some people who have taken these courses, who've only been here for a number of years, and obviously just taking up these learning Welsh since about 2019. So I just refer first to one person here, just to see what are their reactions to learning Welsh.
I just move on the date. If I can speak more language or different language, it's getting more opportunity, jobs. Yes, I appreciate I having opportunity to learn Welsh because it's just like giving me more skill, like learning new skill.
Right, and then on to Joseph.
Dwi'n teimlo fy mod i'n cyfrannu at y bywyd cymdeithasol, achos fel aelod cymdeithas yr iaith sy'n helpu gyda'r iaith, ac dwi wedi cael llais mawr, achos mae pobl yn gwerthfawrogi beth dwi wedi gwneud gyda'r iaith, beth dwi'n gwneud ar gyfer y iaith.
Sorry about that. So there's just very briefly some reactions. So there has been a drive to give Welsh classes to refugees, and has been integrated, as I said, in some of the mainstream English provision. So I realise my time is more or less up. So just to present you some of the benefits, I might not be able to name them all, but certainly Welsh classes have enriched integration cohesion, and I would argue improves well-being of migrants. There is a niche there for Welsh language revitalisation, which maybe isn't emphasised enough in policy. There have been challenges definitely since the pandemic, and there is a need now for a more one-to-one approach, and I'm working on language partnership schemes, befriending schemes. There is no Welsh policy for migrants in Wales, and that's something to consider in the future. However, how effective would that be? And is a more community-led approach more effective in the end? So, diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting. And from Wales, we will move on to Canada and to Director General Alain Dupois, Fédération des communautés acadiennes et francophones. His organization is a national organization representing French-speaking communities living in 9 provinces and 3 territories in Canada. Since the year 2000, the organization has been very active in the area of immigration and has made French language immigration a collective and national priority in support of the development and enhancement of Acadian and Francophone communities in Canada. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this invitation. It is still quite early here in Canada, so bear with me if I am looking for my words. French is my first language, so and I'm used to speaking about this subject in my native tongue. So thank you very much for the invitation, and bravo to the previous presentations. They were excellent. Just to start off, my organization represents 2.7 million people who speak French outside of Quebec. Quebec is the majority, French is the majority language in the province of Quebec in Canada, whereas English is the majority language in the rest of the country. And in the rest of the country, those are the provinces and territories where our organization represents Francophones. So Canada is obviously a very big country territorially. And as you see on this map that I'm showing, Quebec is where there are about 7 million Francophones that live in Quebec and that speak French. French is the common language in Quebec. There is an important English minority in Quebec. But today I'm going to be speaking to you about the other green dots on this map that are Francophone and Acadian communities in a minority setting. And most of these communities are not majority communities. So if you look, I'm from Northern Ontario, and my community, Sudbury, is about 30% French speaking, 70% English speaking. So I'm going to talk to you about immigration, but in a doubly minority situation. I feel like the presentations that came before me were probably more representative of what the experience is in Quebec, where newcomers, even if they don't speak French, will learn French to integrate into society, whereas in our communities, we mostly welcome people that already speak French from La Francophonie, from different countries in obviously Europe, Northern Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa, and a bit from Asia also. But our communities mostly integrate people who already have the language, which might be an advantage at some level. But there are also some difficulties for those newcomers to adapt to that bilingual setting where English is still very much required. And our minority communities, Francophone communities outside of Quebec, they are very different. There are some communities where it's a very rural context where they are majority French speaking, whereas a city as where I am right now, Ottawa, where we're the national capital, we are about 15% French speakers in this capital. So obviously English is still very important. For our communities, for our Francophone communities, we've been established across the country for generations. Most of our communities were settled in the 1800s by Quebecers that moved west, if you will. The case of Atlantic Canada is a little bit different, where the French settled in the 1600s and developed and colonized that area first, then moved on to Quebec, and then pursued colonization from the western provinces. But for our communities that are originally from Canada, immigration became a priority for us for our survival, for the survival of French outside of Quebec in the early 2000s. So my organization worked with the Government of Canada to change the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the National Act, to make sure that Canada as a whole would have an objective not only to integrate newcomers in French in Quebec, but to also have an objective to welcome people in French across the country, even in a minority setting. So as of 2003, the Canadian federal government set a target of 4% of French-speaking immigrants outside of Quebec to settle in our Francophone minority communities. Unfortunately, that target has never been reached since 2003. We're about a 3% Francophone immigration. So what has happened is that the demographic weight of our French-speaking communities outside of Quebec has unfortunately been shrinking as well. So for us, it's a very important issue to make sure that for our future development and frankly, our existence as minority communities, is very important that the Government of Canada does more to attract and promote our Francophone and bilingual communities across the country. I will say the difficulty for us as a minority community is that we don't have very much control over government policy, seeing as we are minorities in every government level across the country, provincial, federal, and municipal. Our communities don't have a government that can, put forward policies very easily that will favor our Francophone minorities. So we have to do a lot of political lobbying to be heard at all levels of government, which takes time. And obviously, we are always informing why it's important to add French as a requirement for a percentage of newcomers that come settle in outside of Quebec. And the importance of that is that for us, our linguistic rights as Francophones often depend on the percentage of the population we represent. So we will only have access to government services if, for example, we are more than 5% of the overall population. So for us as a welcoming community, it's very important that we keep receiving newcomers in our communities. But there are many challenges to integrating in a Francophone or a bilingual setting. And the first is that an immigrant needs to learn both official languages to succeed in our communities, because basically there are very few jobs that require French only outside of Quebec. And we do get newcomers that only speak French. And unfortunately, for them, they must learn English to succeed and to get a job, unless they want to work in French language schools or daycares or services to the Francophone minority. So that's basically a double challenge. You must have both languages to succeed in a minority setting. I'm just going to go a little. So the settlement experience within a Francophone community is very different and requires also a different approach. For us, it's very important that the immigrant, the French-speaking immigrant, has services in French from the day they get to Canada, because for us, we've heard stories, and it's a tendency that if the newcomer that is a French-speaking has only access to English services when they get to Canada, they will not necessarily discover our community. And we've heard many stories about Francophone immigrants that settle in one of our provinces and learns 4 or 5 years later that there's a French minority community and that there's a French language school that they could have sent their kids to. And so for us, it's very important to develop a pathway of French language services for newcomers from the day they get to Canada all the way till they get to their citizenship in our country. The other important thing is that French language services not only gives you that connection with the Francophone community, but it is a better service because it is a service that speaks your language, that knows the diversity of la francophonie internationale, of international Francophone populations, and it's a service that we want tailored to the specificities of the French-speaking immigrant. Canada has also developed pre-departure services, and I think that that's quite unique for as a country. We now offer services before the newcomer even arrives in Canada, where we will try and put them in a school and take into account the needs of the whole family. And that has also been good because we are able to speak to newcomers even before they arrive in Canada, to make sure that they know that Francophone communities exist. And we developed a new service at Toronto Pearson Airport, which is the biggest airport in Canada, where we now have direct contact with Francophone immigrants when they get to the airport to already tell them, talk to them about how you can live in French in our different communities across the country. I think that there are a lot of possibilities and best practices that exist for newcomers. I think that because we ourselves as Francophones in Canada are a minority, we have a sense of inclusion that is probably much different than the Anglophone community in Canada. And there's a shared type of struggle there. We obviously as French speakers are always want to make sure that our language is protected and promoted in Canada. And I think that that for some newcomers, that's very it's a shared struggle that they can integrate and become also part of that objective to make sure that our communities and the French language still survives throughout for the future generations. That being said, for me personally, French is a beautiful language and I'm very proud of that heritage. But for Francophone newcomers that come from French can also be a colonial language that specifically for African immigrants, they don't always have that same connection to the French language. And as we heard, English is very attractive for them because it is seen as the language in which there are more job opportunities. And some Francophone immigrants that come to our communities also decide not to speak French or not to pass on French to their children and to their families. So we also see that assimilation that can exist more rapidly for Francophone newcomers in a minority setting. But for us, what is important as a Francophone community is developing that sense of community based on a shared language and multiple cultures. So I think in our context, there's not necessarily a desire to make sure that everybody has the same cultural background or that melting pot vision that some countries may have. For us, in our schools, we see very multicultural backgrounds, and the thing that does unite us is that shared language. And also, our objective is always to make sure that our communities are more welcoming and that immigrants find their place, that they can become teachers, they can become leaders in our different community organizations. And for that, we must continually be promoting inclusion and diversity, and we have many different initiatives like Francophone Immigration Week, where every year there are about 250 activities across the country to make sure that we celebrate Francophone immigrants, and that has been a great initiative from the FCFA that's been promoted also by our governments. We also designated 14 welcoming Francophone communities where the government and our organization have partnered to make sure that there are projects to bring together the host communities and Francophone immigrants. And also we offer forums to discuss systemic racism and discrimination to make sure that our communities are always evolving in their desire to learn and to be welcoming for all. And that is a very important thing to do, not only 1 or 2 times, but on a continual basis, because inclusion is not something necessarily that is always natural and given. So in conclusion, making Francophone immigration a success requires working on 2 poles: the host community and the immigrant experience, to make sure they get the services in the language of their choice. But immigrant inclusion and retention also requires open-minded communities that are mobilized to this end. And we've been doing that with our many different groups across the country to offer jobs, schools, and civic participation opportunities. So thank you very much. I hope that I was in the time, and I am open to questions a bit later on. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Alain, for sharing this morning hour with us. And after the Canadian example, we come back to Finland. Researcher Pasi Saukkonen and ministerial advisor Anna Brun will now comment from a Finnish perspective. And Dr. Pasi Saukkonen is a political scientist who is currently working at the City of Helsinki Executive Office, Urban Research and Statistics Unit. His expertise is in nationalism and national identity, language policy, integration policy, cultural policy, and politics in a multicultural society. He has been a member of the Finnish Advisory Board on Language Affairs and Finnish National Commission for UNESCO. And I introduce Anna also now at the same time. Anna Brun is working at the Labour, Migration and Integration Unit at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment in Finland. And she is working with questions relating to diversity and integration, the integration of vulnerable groups, as well as integration in Swedish. Please, the floor is yours.
Shall I start, Anna, or do you want to start? Yeah. Thank you very much, Ms. Chairperson, and very great thanks to all the three presentations that we just heard. It's always very nice to learn new things, and I'm sure that Finnish society as a whole also got a lot of lessons that we have to think carefully about and try to apply what is applicable and valuable. It's also always very nice to hear this kind of cases, country cases in a row, because you start observing similarities and differences between countries, which always are there. And this was also the case that on the one hand, in all three presentations, similar kinds of questions were discussed, but also all the settings were quite different from each other. As you might know, Finland from a language policy perspective is quite a peculiar case. Because the country is officially bilingual, two national languages, without the country being a federal state or having any other kind of regional linguistic autonomous arrangements, with the exception of the Åland Islands. And this is quite not so common in the Western countries, at least, and it brings along some questions also with regard to in what language immigrants should integrate into Finland. I very much agree with Vicente said. I'll generalize his point a little bit, repeating that learning languages must always be linked to progress in order to language policies, language teaching arrangements to be really productive, efficient. There must be a positive immigrant experience, as Alain put it. And the thing in Finland means that we really have to think quite carefully what this progress means in the Finnish case, because it might be a little bit different than in other places. One thing was what Sandra Bariqvist said in the beginning, is that for many immigrants into Finland, no doubt, not always, but in many cases, Swedish might very well be the easier language to learn compared with Finnish language to start with. That not only those who have Germanic language as a mother tongue, but lots of immigrants also know at least already English or German or some other Scandinavian languages, and then learning Swedish is definitely easier than learning Finnish. Then on the other side, there is the fact that Finnish is the predominant language of the country, that there is no bigger municipality, no big city where Swedish would be in a majority position, that Finnish is a majority language everywhere with the exception of some smaller communities. And I would very strongly recommend all those who come to stay here for good to also learn Finnish, because otherwise you limit your own opportunities and possibilities quite much, because there are so few jobs where you can get along only with Swedish only. But then there is the third thing, and that this is related with Finland as a whole being an officially bilingual country, that if you really want to have a large range of opportunities, there are lots of jobs, especially in officially bilingual communities, but also in the whole of Finland, where not only Finnish language, but also Swedish language is required. So in a way, in order to integrate into Finnish society comprehensively, understood as having as large a range of opportunities as possible, you really should also learn both languages, Finnish and Swedish. And I think that's a message that we should give, but it's also something that we have to work with. And I heard very interesting from both Gwen and Elaine and Vicent, that how could you assist, how could you have that kind of institutions and instruments with which not only one language can be taught, but two languages. But I don't have more time at my disposal, so Anna, I will give the floor to you.
Thank you, Pasi, and thank you all speakers. It's been a very interesting few hours to hear about the different models used in each country. And just as Pasi, I was actually quite much thinking about the differences and similarities between all speakers we've heard today. I reflected upon what quite many of you told, that seeing integration in a minority language as a way to support actually integration into a local community. So I think this is a very strong positive message that I hear today. Choosing a minority language can actually be a good way of integrating into a local community. Alain Dupuy mentioned the importance of policies of inclusion and welcoming society to actually support this kind of integrating into the local community. And I think this is something that we talk more and more about also in Finland at the moment. It was very interesting what Gwen and Chaim mentioned about what kind of results she saw when students were studying Welsh, which is a non-dominant language, and how it made it possible for them to actually reflect on more personal aspects of life, and in that way also increase their well-being. I think this is a good example of how studying a minority language also supports the actual inclusion into society. But I could also hear that there are quite many sort of contextual or legal differences between the countries. One being the national sort of will to actually recognize the linguistic diversity existing in the country. In some countries, integration in different languages is being part of the common language policy. In other countries, it is not. In the Finnish case, as Pasi mentioned, we do have possibilities to integrate either in Finnish or in Swedish. And it is a question of individual choice, which language you actually choose. It was interesting to hear Vincent Clement mentioning how in Catalan case actually compulsory language training will have negative results on the actual learning of the language. It makes students sometimes unmotivated and challenges the possibilities to learn the language. That was an interesting example. But as I said, the Finnish case is somewhat different because we do have the possibility for students to make individual choices. Because I'm running out of time, I will stop here. But once again, I would like to thank also the Swedish Assembly for organizing this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pasi Saukkonen and Anna Brun for your comments. And now I want to ask if any one of the speakers would like to comment on something or ask a question to someone else here, someone of the speakers. We could have time for one or two comments. You can just open your Alain, please.
Yes, I was very interested by Vincent from the case from Catalonia. I just wanted to see if you could comment a bit more about the citizenship test or certificate that was offered or that was required by the local government, and maybe to the other participants also, is here in Canada, for example, Quebec, where French is the majority language, there isn't a specific test for the French-speaking province that is required from immigrants. It's the same national test for all Canadian, for all people coming to Canada. So I'm interested in seeing, are there other examples, and maybe if Vincent can talk a little bit more about that, of specific citizenship certificates or tests that are adapted to the minority language context. Thank you.
Thank you. And would Dr. Vincent Clement want to could you comment on this question?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question, Alain. To my knowledge, and I've done a comparative research in Europe, Catalonia is the first and the only region at sub-state level that has compulsory language requirements. So there is by law that any immigrant must learn or attend, as I said before, a Catalan language course to prove that they are willing to integrate, right? I also know that you will probably know more than I do that Quebec, because of it's the only place, I would say in the Western world that I know of, that has also exclusive competence on immigration. So they can also have immigrants from French-speaking territories. They can also select migrants. So that's something that we cannot do here in any sub-state level in Europe, not Catalonia, Basque Country, or any other region in Europe. So far, I would say that Catalonia is the only place at a sub-state level. I'd like to highlight the sub-state level that has this compulsory, again, the word compulsory is important, integration, language integration measures. But I said before, they're not really actually effective, because you only require to attend, not an exam, or it's only a 90-hour course. So okay, it's one step, but it's just symbolic rather than something else. And many migrants kind of feel like they are obliged to learn a language that they do not hear on the street, because they usually usually live in Barcelona or the metropolitan area in Barcelona. When you go to the regions, to the small villages, then that's something else. That's another story. They actually integrate through Catalan because it's a language spoken there. But the majority of the people live in Barcelona or the metropolitan area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, time is running, and I think we have to continue with the program. Now it's time for me to invite the last speaker of the day, and she is Claudine Breuil. She's a Swiss member of the Committee of Experts of the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages and senior lecturer at the University of Freiburg. Her research areas are language, contexts in multilingual areas, integration of individual and official bi-multilingualism, and multilingual education. And Claudine will now sum up the discussion about what we have heard today. And so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can, very well.
Thank you so much to Folktinget for the organization of this webinar, which is very timely because we have in our title benefits and challenges. And of course, we have a lot of challenges. We have a double challenge because there's a challenge where we have bilingual and multilingual areas, and migration is a challenge. So we have, so to say, a double challenge with the topic you have chosen. It was so interesting to listen to these case studies. We had Catalonia, Wales, and Canada, and also Finland. And I think it is so interesting to hear about multilingual regions. I always said I'm happy to live in a multilingual region, and I would continue to live in one because it's so interesting and diverse and dynamic. I'm not going to summarize each individual presentation. All of them were very, very interesting. We have very different political systems. We have federal system, a regional system, a centralized system. I myself from a very federal state. Then the status of the minority languages presented are very, very diverse. If we considered the number of speakers, the political status, the help the minority gets from the central government. So the status of these different languages is very, very diverse. We have heard some very interesting ideas. Minority languages should be attractive. I think this is very important. We have to be attracted by these minority languages because attraction and empathy and feelings, that's the motor of our acts. And I think we learn better when we are motivated. It has been said too that there has to be a need, and need creates motivation. Then what we heard too is that migration can be a threat to minority languages, but also a chance for minority languages, but we need a language policy for that. So a language policy in a multilingual area is not only on the national or regional language, but also it should also encompass the migrant languages, which is very important in these countries which face migration, and it's not going to stop. I know that this is a process which will even get more and more important. we have to recognize that linguistic integration has to take place in both the majority and minority language. Why should the migrants be not so well off as the local population? They want to be bilingual, they have to be bilingual. So when you migrate, maybe you have to learn both languages. And somebody spoke about the monolingual ideology. We know all about this monolingual ideology. And now we have to go further than the bilingual ideology. We have to consider multilingualism as the norm. And as somebody says, that the migrants very often have a multilingual experience. They don't have a monolingual experience. They don't have a bilingual experience. Very often they have a multilingual experience. They speak different dialects, which are not recognized, for instance. What is interesting too in the case of English is that English, in the case of Canada, it's an official national language, but English is not only a mother tongue, it's a lingua franca, it's a second language, it's a foreign language, and there are far more people who speak English as a second or foreign language than as a first or as a mother tongue, as we say. What was very positive, I think, were the contacts of Wales with Quebec francisation classes, and this is very good. That's what we are doing now. I think networking is very important. That's what we do. So maybe we should keep in touch and rephrase the good practices and share them, although we know that our areas are so different and the minority languages are so different. Then what is very important is, and it was said also, is the need for information, for good information for everybody. Information and communication. We have to inform and communicate that we have minority languages, that we have to learn them for economical, cultural, social reasons, for inclusion, for awareness rising. That's very, very important. And not only years after the migrants are here, but before they come, or right when they come, as this was said in the Canadian context. We know that the migrants can back and support the revitalizing process. And this is very important because it gives them also responsibility to be part of this revitalizing process for smaller languages. That's very important. Then we heard that sometimes the minority language is easier to learn than the majority language, like in the case of Finland. I have to say, yes, in my case, I understand a lot more of Swedish than Finnish with German and English. And I have the Swiss case with the Romansh as a very small language with 40,000 speakers. And we have a very important Portuguese immigration in Switzerland, and in Graubünden region, the Portuguese speakers back the revitalization of the Romansh language, which is very important. Then we have seen that we have a state policy, but we need maybe a lower level of offers for language courses, for projects, as we have seen in Wales. Sometimes the national level is too far away from us. We need to have community projects. They are maybe more efficient than the other, the big projects which come from the states, and when nobody's fully responsible for the implementation and of measuring, of course, the efficiency. We have projects, we have a policy, and of course we have to measure the effects, the efficiency of our policies. So that was my time which was given to me. So once again, thank you so much for these presentations.
Thank you very much, Claudine Breuil, for summing up the discussion here today. And thank you for your wise words. And let me also just conclude by saying that I think that this webinar has showed us that there is a lot we can learn from each other, and that the discussion must continue. And I'm sorry that we couldn't now answer all the questions here in the chat that we didn't have time for that this time. And on behalf of Folktinget, I once again want to express my gratitude to all the speakers and all of you participants here today. This discussion, this webinar will be published later on the channels of Folktinget, so you can watch this later on and listen to the discussion later on. And well, finally, thank you for being here with us today. And I wish you a good day in Canada and a nice evening here in Europe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
A pleasure.
Bye-bye, everybody. Tack.
Yeah.
Diolch.
Hi, Colin.
Hello, who's talking to me?
It's me, Claudine.
Oh, hello there. Good to see you. How are you?
Fine. How are you? Since we met in Strasbourg. Hi. Here I am.
Right. I've just put my video on. So will they let us still speak for a while?
Okay. Yes. Here I am, Claudine from Switzerland.
Good.
We met in Strasbourg.
Yes. Are you well?
Talking about the charter.
Yes. I'm just trying to finish a book for Cambridge on language policy and new speakers.
Ah, very good.
So I've got a few more months before I submit it, but today's discussion was very good. I enjoyed it very much.
Very good. Yeah. New speakers are very important, and so migrants are new speakers as well. So it's
well, that's
the topic.
Divide that somebody suggested between migrants from within the same state and immigrants from outside the state. What we didn't hear much about was religious and cultural differences, that people often learn a language, feel imposters because they don't share the same culture. They communicate, but they don't always empathize. That's part of the problem. So,
yeah, right.
I want to thank you as well for a very interesting discussion, and I'm sorry the time schedule was so tight, but so we rushed through everything. But obviously there's a need to continue the discussion also, and I hope that we could arrange something similar in the future, because there's a lot of experience that needs to be shared and thoughts to be shared as well. So thank you a lot. I really need to end this meeting now. So Colin and Claudine, if you want to continue talking, you have to do it through another channel.
The last message from me is, for all the success that Gwenan cites, for every one person, there must be thousands who don't really integrate at all. And we don't really concentrate on them. I won't call them failures, but they are a missing opportunity, aren't they, for us? It's a challenge.
Yes.
Anyway, many thanks. Tack så mycket.
Tack så mycket. Thank you. And
okay, bye-bye.
with us. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.